Hello and welcome to Sacred Psychology, the podcast for misfits and mystics. Here, neuroscience and spirituality go hand in hand. Join me, Tamara Powell, on a no-holds-barred adventure outside the box, because that's where all the truly great shit happens anyway. Welcome back to Sacred Psychology. I'm your host, Tamara Powell. My guest today is a repeat favorite. Her name is Jessa Zimmerman, and she is a licensed sex therapist and couples counselor who was on episode 65, sharing all about the 5 biggest pitfalls to great sex. Well, she's written a new book called Sex Without Stress, a couple's guide to overcoming disappointment, avoidance, and pressure. And as a clinician myself who frequently deals with issues regarding sexuality and sex in general, I couldn't wait to have her back on to talk about this book because I think it is so practical, both for clinicians and couples alike. You definitely want to go out and get this one. But first, how about a little more about this awesome human being? Jessa specializes in helping couples who have a good relationship, but who are avoiding sex because it's become stressful, negative, disappointing, or pressured. She educates, coaches, and supports them as they go through her 9-phase experiential process, which is what we're talking about today, that allows these couples real-world practice in changing their relationship and their sex life. She does this work in person in Seattle or online. So for those of you in Washington, you can get in on this wherever you're at. She also has a podcast called Better Sex. You guys definitely want to check that out as well. So without further ado, I give you the one, the only, the ever incomparable Jessa Zimmerman. Hey, Jessa, welcome back to the show.
Thank you so much for having me back on.
I am so excited about your new book.
Me too.
Thanks for writing it. So your new book is called Sex Without Stress, a couple's guide to overcoming disappointment, avoidance, and pressure. And damn if that does not say it all.
Yeah. I tell you, that coming up with the title kept me up like every night at 4 a.m. I mean, I just kept going through stuff, and it took a long time to settle on something that really could capture it all. So
no, you did a great job. That really is what the book does. And like I was just telling you off air, I think it is so well-rounded and thorough. I highly recommend it to both therapists and couples alike. So thank you for the work you're doing.
You are welcome.
So to kick it off, I want to read to our listeners what you say in the intro about some of why you wrote this book, because I think it really captures what I see in my own clients, and I'm sure what a lot of couples out there are feeling. So you write, are you avoiding your sex life? I want to help. If you've picked up this book, I imagine that you are unhappy about the state of your sex life. Perhaps in your relationship, sex is not working well. You love your partner and you know sex matters, but sex has become a source of hurt, doubt, and confusion. I also imagine you're anxious about confronting the topic of sex with your partner. You have no idea what you'll find or where the conversation will go. It's scary when you feel like sex isn't working. It often causes you to doubt yourself, your partner, and your relationship. Frequently, it's the thing keeping you awake with worry at 4 a.m. The human tendency is to avoid whatever scares us, so I imagine you and or your partner are avoiding sex at this point. You're not happy. Your partner's not happy. You can't talk about it productively, and the problems are palpable between you. This is the proverbial elephant in the room, and it is crowding out the positive parts of your relationship. But here's the good news. There is a way forward, and we're going to talk about that today. But hot damn, girl. I mean, seriously, you nailed it. It becomes this thing that we're just like, oh, so awkward. And it's not like it goes away.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, I hear this from so many clients, and it's actually surprising how many of them use the same language about feeling fraught and pressured and guilty and the elephant in the room. And, so it was not hard to describe this because I've had so many clients describe it to me.
For sure. So you're pretty transparent in the book, which I also admire because I think it really is important for people to see their own story, being resonated in their therapist or whoever's going to try to work with them. And can you share for the listeners who haven't read it yet, a little bit about why this was an important thing for you personally, why you even got into couples work?
Well, I'm going to start a little bit in the middle of the story. So when I was newly in graduate school, I'd gone to get my master's after getting a divorce. And I knew being a therapist already that I wanted to focus on couples work, partly because my parents had been really happily married for 52 years, and that was not enough for me to be successful in my own relationship. And so I was determined to figure out what makes relationships work. And then early in my graduate program, a sex therapist was teaching one of the classes, and she talked about, she considered most of sex therapy to be grief and loss work. And that hit me. Yeah, it just hit me in the gut. It was one of those moments. Those don't happen to me very often, but this lightning bolt, right? Like people are suffering. And I also, in that moment, I just remembered so much about my own marriage. We had other things wrong than our sex life, but it certainly showed up there too. And I remembered the fear I would have at 4 a.m. I remembered over time, pretending to be asleep when he would come to bed, and this huge feeling of doubt and fear and brokenness. And, at 4 a.m, I'd be totally worried about it. In the light of day, I could kind of dismiss it.
Yeah.
And imagine, it's not that bad, but the reality of it would hit me in the middle of the night. And it was just, terrifying and sad and, I felt ashamed and afraid and devastated. And, so it all came together in that moment when I heard that sex therapist. It's like, on the one hand, there's so much potential for connection and happiness and joy. And then the other side of the coin is this horrible sense of failure and inadequacy.
Yeah. And it's for both partners. And I think that's the struggle. So what I love about your process that we're going to get into is you really describe that connective piece and the cycles between us and our partners.
Yeah.
And how, you kick off one side, the other side is going to seesaw and vice versa. And so that can be tricky for clinicians and couples to try and even navigate. Where do we start? So let's do this. Yeah. Go ahead.
I was going to just say it's true that neither person stuck in this cycle is having any fun. Whether you're the one more interested in sex or less, this is painful on both sides of the equation. And I'm hoping that if people understand that they can become allies in this, if they have felt adversarial at all or like opposing interests or something, they don't need to be. They can really be on the same team trying to work through this because they're both really suffering.
Yeah, it reminds me of that phrase about, sex is kind of like air. You don't really think about it till you're not getting any.
I haven't actually heard that, but yeah, that's a good, I have heard that, when sex is working well in your relationship, most people, you think of it, it's like, it's about 20% of our life, but when it isn't working well, it feels huge. It feels like 80%, it sort of overshadows everything else that could be going well.
Yeah. So let's go through the 9 phases pretty quickly so people can understand, what they're getting into when they're, wanting to fix this process, either with themselves or with a professional. What's the first phase?
Yeah. And can I just say, to put it in a book, I made it phases in somewhat of an order, but it's a little bit arbitrary because to me, all 9 of these things are at play all the time.
Very good.
These are the mindsets or attitudes or competencies really that couples need to develop. So even though they're sort of listed 1 through 9, that's a little bit of that was so I could put it into a process in a book, right? So I just want to say that as a beginning. So
no, you're right. And I like that word mindsets or competencies because it is, Esther Perel says sex is like a conversation just with other means. And I think it's important for all of us to learn to have different conversations.
Right.
All right.
So I started with prioritizing intimacy. So just sort of at a basic level, are you spending time together with your partner? Is this got some space in your calendar and your schedule and your energy expenditure? And for people that are avoiding sex, generally the answer is no, right? They're not making that time. And some of them aren't making, a lot of people have stopped having any physical affection.
Yes.
They're avoiding each other in general because it feels so dangerous to open that door at all. Right. So depending on, how long you've been stuck or how badly you're stuck, the answer can vary. But the first step is to really prioritize some time together and some space to be emotionally and physically intimate.
See, and as soon as you say that, I automatically can see why these overlap with other areas, because I'm thinking about stereotypically women, but sometimes men who come in and they're very staunch and proud of the reasons why they're not prioritizing it. They've got young children, or they just had a baby, or it's because the relationship's not going well, or he cheated. And so there's all these reasons why, how dare you ask me to make, his intimacy or our intimacy a priority. But that gets into other issues. So,
yeah. And there are always reasons we're not connecting, right? And there are certainly, even if you're not avoiding your relationship, there are realities of life, children and jobs and health. And, there's only so many hours in a day. And if you want to make your relationship better, you got to figure out, you got to take some time from and energy from somewhere and invest.
Not asking you to run a marathon. Just
right.
Your 10 minutes of you, maybe.
Yeah.
All right. So number one, prioritizing. What's number two?
Number two is communicating about sex or even just about your relationship. So starting to open up the conversation instead of avoiding it. So because people that get stuck in this cycle, not only do they avoid sex, they avoid talking about it. Right. Yep. So people probably listening can recognize that one of them might try to bring up a conversation and that gets deflected, or it gets overlooked, or it gets turned into some other argument, or, maybe people, discuss or fight about this once every few months, but then put it away in between. So the second step is to open up the dialogue and start to have communication about what's happening in your sex life and how you feel about it in your relationship.
Here's where I see a lot of couples getting lost in content rather than process, as we shrink types would say. It becomes the he said, she said, or about the details rather than about the feelings behind it. One of us feeling pressured, the other one's feeling rejected, for example. And so I like that you're kind of giving it an easier, more permissible energy around it. Let's just open back up.
Yeah, exactly. And again, this is where I think it's so important to recognize you're both suffering. You both have, sort of flip sides of the coin kind of experiences around this. And if you can tackle it together as a problem instead of opposed to each other, these conversations get easier. And I recommend, I want people to come at these conversations, not in a blaming, accusatory way or catastrophizing, but from a really positive place. I want a relationship to be as good as it can be. And this part is not working very well. And we both know that. This is not a surprise to the other person.
No.
So let's get constructive about it.
All right. Awesome. What's the third phase or mindset?
The third one is accessing desire.
Ooh.
I mean, this is kind of a complicated topic because people that are avoiding sex, typically, at least one of them is struggling with sexual desire. So they're either caught in what I call the traps of desire discrepancy. In every relationship, one person wants more sex than the other one.
Yep.
So desire discrepancy is a fact of life. It's not a problem. But a lot of people don't handle that well. Yes. And they take it personally, or they struggle and they sort of fall into these holes around it. So that can be a real issue. With sexual desire and this idea of having reactive sex drive. So people don't understand. Well, there's two ways to have sexual desire. So one I call proactive, which is where you get spontaneously interested in sex. Sex is on your mind. You get aroused or horny. You're interested in it. You're thinking about it.
I'd like to higher drive spouse.
Often the higher desire person has proactive desire. Not always, but they usually go hand in hand. But that's what our culture says is or sex drive, right? So I get clients coming in and saying, I have no libido. Well, what they don't realize is they have reactive sex drive.
Yes.
So if if things are right and they just start and they get going and they start to respond to what's happening and they start to get aroused, like, now I want sex. And most people don't understand that that's totally normal.
I was so glad that you brought up that point, because I remember in my grad school days, realizing from, Kinsey's research on Johnson and Masters that, especially for women, a lot of women don't even realize they're turned on until after they're a few minutes into the act. Our subjective version of arousal is not always so great. And so for up to 50%, and I'd venture to guess more than that sometimes, it is reactive and not proactive. So I loved the way that you described it that way, because I think it's a much easier way of remembering it for people who aren't going to go get their sex therapy certification.
Yeah. And it's not just women. A lot of the writing about this has been as if this is a women's phenomenon, but there are men with reactive desire too.
A lot.
I think we all tend to get more reactive as we get older. We get maybe reactive based on circumstances and stress. We may come in and out of this. It may not define us our whole life, but it requires both people understanding it's totally normal. And then you have to accommodate it. It requires opportunity. You've got to be willing to start and give it a space to grow and happen. And of course, you got to be okay if it doesn't. It's not like every time you start, the engine turns over, right? So both people need to understand this and approach sex differently so that sexual desire can show up. So, if somebody is struggling to feel sexual desire, the phase is just to start to learn to access that.
Yeah, I love that. I read another statistic that said that on average, for both partners in a couple, they will only both want it about once a month at the same time, the proactive side of things, which means the rest of the month, however many times you guys are having sex, someone's got to be more proactive and the other one's got to be reactive. And both of us need to be okay with it and not take it so freaking seriously or personally.
Yeah.
Someone's got to be hey, babe, want to play?
Yeah, another way to think about this, or another thing that happens, right? In the beginning of a relationship, this doesn't always happen, but frequently both people have proactive desire because it's new, it's exciting, they don't see each other all the time, or, put all that new relationship energy that fosters this. And then people don't recognize that it's normal for that to shift and at least one person to become more reactive. So it's like, what happened? We used to not take be able to keep our hands off each other. But that's a normal transition for people.
Thank you for bringing that up. So that was 4. Where do we move in stage 5?
Actually, that was 3.
Oh, 3. I'm reading us up.
Don't have to go in order, but
you're right.
So another mindset is about enjoying the journey and not being focused on the destination. In some ways means don't just be so focused on an orgasm, but really whatever outcome that you might have focused on, as if there's a goal, and especially as if there's a hierarchy,
right?
Around sex. It's like, wait, anything you're doing can just be enjoyed right now for what it is, without thinking ahead, without planning, and certainly without disappointment if you don't hit certain, places.
Yeah, I was just thinking about the APA's definition of a healthy sex life just being something that's mutually pleasurable to both of us. Well, shit, with that definition, it's broad and friendly.
I like that definition because as you saw in the book, I was trying to define sex, and it turns out to be really difficult if you want certain things considered. So I like that one. And somebody else I talked to they were talking about, we typically have a linear, like a staircase model of sex.
Yeah.
So we start out with like kissing and then touching, and we're moving up a staircase, right? Taking off clothes, and then there's genital contact, and then there's maybe oral sex, and then there's intercourse or penetrative sex or orgasm, and we're done. As opposed to a circle where all these things are on the circle and they're all equivalent. Right. And you can go in any order, and there's not a stopping point, and nothing has more value than anything else.
Enjoy the journey, people. I love that.
It makes such a difference. And again, you read this, but I'll share it.
Yes, please.
I talk to clients think about sex like you're going to the playground.
Mm-hmm.
It's the outing that counts, not what you do when you get there. It's not about going down the slide. I mean, you just go and you do what you feel like doing when you're there, and you get inspired for the next thing if you do, and you stay as long as you want to stay. And then when you go home, it's great. Wasn't that a wonderful trip?
Oh, so my favorite.
If people can embrace that, the pressure goes down. There's always a way to have an orgasm if you really want to have one, right?
That's
if you get to the point where you're turned on enough, it's not like, those are nice, right? But it doesn't have to happen at the playground. It doesn't have to happen in any particular way. And it doesn't have to happen. So
no, sometimes it's fun just to be close, like semi-naked playtime.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's all mental eroticism anyway. That's the biggest factor, whether or not we get off. So what's the fifth mindset?
Okay, the fifth one is learning to be present. So in the moment right now, and I guess it's kind of related to enjoying the journey. It's like, can you be right now here with what's happening with the person you're doing with it? And not thinking, first of all, not being in the future or the past, but also not being distracted or overwhelmed or full of self-conscious thoughts, just present.
Yeah, because that's the biggest anxiety block ever. It's the biggest psychological block for men, for women, for everybody. So I think that's where the big gold standard in sex therapy of sensate focus tends to pop in so often. But what I love about your model is that whole like circular holistic idea. There's so much more going on than just our brains not present in the room with us, focusing on the sensations. Yeah. But sensate focus can be a great way to snap yourself back into the moment. What does it feel like for him to be kissing you there? What does she smell like? What does her touch feel like?
Yeah. And similar to sensate focus, the exercise I describe in the book, it has similarities to that and differences to that, but it's, that's a place to practice all 9 of these phases. One at a time, different orders, whatever it's challenging for you, like it gets revealed as you do it. But to have physical experiences as a practice in being present. You can also do meditation or mindfulness or things that aren't physical, right? To develop this skill.
Yeah, like mindful toothbrushing.
Yeah, there you go. Right.
This is one that we got assigned in Buddhist psychology. It actually was somewhat difficult for me because I don't realize how often my mind wanders while I'm brushing my teeth. But
right.
Oh, so good. All right. So let's stay present. We need to. And,
okay.
Why is that so hard for us? I don't know. But I think maybe because modern day society, I don't want to go about the evils of technology because we're literally using it right now. But I'm sure you've heard that stat that human beings now have the attention span in less than a goldfish, 8 seconds.
Oh. Well, I have heard that, yes.
That's terrible, especially if we're talking about great sex.
It would be good to practice expanding that.
Yeah. So what's the next one, doll?
The next one is being okay with no.
Ooh.
And this is a foundation of trust in a relationship.
Mm-hmm.
You need to be able to take care of yourself and say no if you need to say no. You've got to be able to have boundaries. And that's the thing that then frees up your partner to actually ask for what they want.
Good point.
If you can't say no, you can't trust your yes. And so either things are happening that you actually don't feel okay about, or your partner is backing way off because they don't trust you to take care of yourself. So they're not safe to just ask for things. So getting this capacity to say no when you need to be able to understand what's happening inside you and where you need to draw these lines. And then also being okay hearing no and not taking that as rejection or taking it personally, but realizing your partner, this should be celebrated, right? Your partner's taking care of themselves. That's a huge step.
Do you have any tips for couples on that one? Because that's hard. And as you know, most families of origin don't really get that right in communicating it to kiddos. And
well, again, in the touching exercise that I have in the book, it's really explicitly practiced in there.
Okay.
That's definitely something that the giver is thinking about and practicing, discerning. When do I need to say no, or do I just want to? Is this a time to stretch myself, or is this a matter of my own well-being? But you can practice this stuff in everyday life. Mm-hmm. Examine how much, where do you say no and where should you, at work, with family, with friends, about what you want to have for dinner tonight with your partner. Like there's so many opportunities to get in touch with what you want and ask for it, but also to speak up and say no if you need to, and to start to learn to have those boundaries. And all of the practice adds up. It's all the same skill.
Yeah, I'm going to have to find it, but this is perfect synchronous timing because I just on my Facebook feed this morning saw another counselor share 9 different ways to say no politely. And they were,
yeah. I did. I saw that too, actually.
Yeah, I'm going to have to put that in the show notes because it was good. Y'all need to practice that. But what a profound shift you just gave us, Jessa, though. If you can't say no, then people can't trust our yeses.
Yeah. And so that really is the foundation of trust in a relationship, is that both people will say no if they need to.
Good stuff. All right, on to the next one. What are we on? 7 now?
Yeah, so 7 is 7 and 8 kind of go together. So 7 is being selfish, which is actually crucial for good sex. You have to be able to take pleasure and think about yourself and savor what's happening. That's what makes you, an engaging partner. It's people get bored if you don't think about yourself and you're just worried about me all the time, even though I might be having orgasms or pleasure, it gets a little hollow.
Oh, God.
If I don't get to participate in your pleasure. So practicing being selfish is really crucial. And a lot of people struggle with that.
Mm-hmm. I was just thinking about Esther Perel's research on self-objectification or, that healthy selfishness or even egocentricity, because what's great for love is so terrible for sex. Like in love, yes, we want you to be a little more selfless, a little more graceful and unconditional. But in sex, both for you and for your partner, you are decreasing our mojo and enjoyment. And it sounds so good on paper. Like men are, especially men, they're so stumped when I look at them and I'm like, yeah, your nurture is so cute on paper, but it is terrible for her orgasms. Truly, her enjoyment of you. Because you're cutting off from the other side.
Right. And I try to stress with clients that you're responsible for your own pleasure. Mm-hmm. So you should be thinking about yourself and what you want and taking responsibility for that. And of course you could enlist your partner. Yeah. But taking ownership of your own pleasure and focusing on that is really important. And then it's coupled with, phase 8, which is being giving. Which means, can your partner also have a chance to be selfish? Can you just be enlisted and in service of their experience? And, good sex is a flow between these things. Or in your sex life, there should be some sort of flow. It doesn't have to be 50-50 or we take, exactly even, every time we have sex. But overall, there should be an ability for both people to be selfish and both people to be giving.
Yeah, and it's fascinating. It sounds so simple as we're talking about it now, but I wish, sometimes people could just see how many, other than the numbers that you and I report, clients just like themselves come in every day. And this is the issue right here. You wouldn't think that this 7 and 8 would be that big of a deal, the giving and receiving. But man, it really is. It screws a lot of marriages up.
Yeah. I mean, all of these, the reason I laid all these out is because these are where people struggle. And they all sound kind of simple, but they're hard to implement and it's hard to shift, whatever parts of these people are struggling with. It takes real practice to change them and develop these new competencies.
Right. I just think because we groom, children, rightfully so, to not be selfish little twats and assholes to be giving and share your lunch and share your toys, and then they grow up and then we're like, actually you kind of need to be responsible for your own pleasure. Yeah. And we want both of these things in measure, right? In balance.
Mm-hmm. And you want to be selfish, in a good way. Like I had a client call it self-full.
Exactly.
Full instead of selfish, it's like, because that's got such a negative connotation. We're not talking about being insensitive brutes or never thinking about our partner. That's not the selfish I mean, but the ability to inhabit your space and your pleasure and your experience is really crucial.
Love that. I use that especially with women too, about being, full of self, so full of your own essence and your authenticity and your confidence that when you walk into that bedroom, you're bringing all of you, not just part of you, the tired or the, left out, the worn out, the embarrassed, the self-conscious. No, self-full.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
So what's 9?
Well, the last one is, it's exploring eroticism. And I do think of this one is the last one, where everything else you can change the order, I believe that you're ready to explore eroticism when you've taken the stress out of sex and you've gotten to a place where you're communicating and where you're having fun again and there's not pressure and expectation, because eroticism is our unique set of things that really turn us on.
Our menu.
Yeah, and it's so much about our brain. It's mental. It's even if it's a particular sexual act you love, it's probably because of the mental meaning you make of it. So it's really harnessing your brain, which is our biggest sex organ. So helping couples explore what their own unique eroticism is, and then how to share that with each other, to understand that about each other, and then to decide if and how they want to harness some of that energy in their sex life. So I do think of it a little bit as the graduate level in this process, because you've got to have a comfort with your sex life in general and with communication with each other, I think, before you can really effectively dive into eroticism.
Amen. And I'm so glad you said that about it being kind of like the advanced work, the graduate level classes there, because I swear most couples come in and that's instantly where they want to jump into. Well, he wants anal and I don't, or she won't give me 3 blowjobs a week. And like, you've missed the other 8, my friends.
Right.
I also love what you just said about it, the meaning that we associate with a particular sexual act. I mean, I think that's true for everything in life, but how cool to apply that to sex.
Yeah, because like you just said, my partner wants anal. Mm-hmm. I mean, it may be that just the physical act of anal is enjoyable to somebody, but odds are there's a mental component to that. Mm-hmm. Whether it is taboo or it's about power, or it's about naughtiness, or, who knows? I mean, it's different for different people, but the mental meaning we make of that act is part of what makes it so erotic. And so trying to understand that about ourselves and about our partner, and then understand first without any judgment, because nothing is off limits in terms of what we think about or find arousing. And then deciding, okay, what do we want to do with this? Is there any part of this we want to act out or incorporate in our sex life? Do we just want to fantasize about it or talk about it? The conversation about what are we going to do with this information comes after the conversations where we understand this about each other.
After, y'all. She said after.
Yeah. I mean, unless you've got that level of comfort already, but those are not the people that are reading this book, right?
Not usually, no.
Yeah.
Gotcha. So if you'll humor me, I would love to pick your brain on some recent themes that I've seen in my clinic and hear what you would have to say regarding your phases.
Okay.
Are you down?
Right. I'm down.
Okay. So what about when one partner comes in and they are adamant that the other one needs to be able to come or ejaculate in order for that person to be fulfilled?
In order for their partner who's not coming to be fulfilled?
No, for them. Or, I guess it would apply either way.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so they take their partner's orgasm.
Personally.
Personally. Yeah, yeah. Well, some of it is about education and explaining that is a myth and that each person's responsible for their own pleasure and, getting them to focus on themselves. I mean, I'd want to talk to the person who isn't coming about whether there's any obstacles for them. Do they have any concern? Do they want to be able to have orgasms?
Almost
how
always.
Are they feeling about it? But to try to tease it apart and separate it, that each person gets to decide what they're interested in pursuing. So for instance, clients will come to me and let's say it's a heterosexual couple and the woman may not be interested in expending the time and energy to have an orgasm.
Good point.
That's up to her. She doesn't want one, right? Whatever pleasure it is she does want, just focus on giving her that.
Yes. And then if it's your other, interestingly, when it's the male, it should be the same way, though, because the pressure, I think, is so high on men to be able to perform on demand and to be able to ejaculate. And I found this interesting trend where women are starting to take it personally when it doesn't happen as easily as they assume.
I mean, this just happened in my office this past week. I mean, it's exactly that situation.
Common.
Again, does the guy want to orgasm? Are there any obstacles we need to be addressing? Some of it can be that mental pressure of, oh my gosh, I have to, or she's going to be upset. Like we have to take that apart.
Yes.
And then what is he interested in experiencing? And let's just let's enjoy the journey. Enjoy the sense of pleasure and connection you can share and take the pressure off this goal because it is so counterproductive.
Thank you so much for saying that. So one of the other most common things that I'm sure you and I and every clinician on the planet deals with is infidelity, especially infidelity that is outside our agreed upon script. Maybe there's been same-sex attractions. Maybe there has been kink or BDSM involved. What do you have to say about bringing that couple back around to trust and fulfillment, so to speak?
Well, I mean, so in my own head, I have a question about, do you mean people that have actually acted on these things with another partner? Or, because some people look at it as infidelity if you're fantasizing about something besides me or what we do.
You're right. Mm-hmm.
So in that case, I try to help people understand, first of all, we don't own each other's minds. Mm-hmm. And there's not really a threat in someone's eroticism. We all have stuff we find erotic. It doesn't mean you have to do it together. It doesn't mean your relationship is unsatisfying if you don't. It could be somebody's perfectly happy with just enjoying that in their own mind. But if people have acted on it, if they've had, sex or some sort of encounter with somebody that's not their partner and they were supposed to be monogamous, if that was the agreement.
Right.
I mean, that's a big conversation. That's sort of different than these 9 phases, I think. Because we've got to...
Yeah, I was more wanting to focus on what happens when we know that they've cheated with something that we can't provide, say same sex or say a behavior that's not on our menu, to keep it more accessible to your book.
Okay. So then I think it's a matter of, I guess there's one question that needs to be asked is, can the person, are they making a choice to live without this thing?
Yeah.
Because if my partner... if it's a same-sex attraction and I'm in a hetero relationship, right, that's not something that's going to be changeable.
Right.
So is the person, is this a deal breaker?
Mm-hmm.
And if it isn't, then I think it's about incorporating this in fantasy, either alone or with your partner, that you can still play with that energy and that attraction. But, anytime we're with one partner, we're giving up others. So...
Yes, thank you for saying that.
We can't take, we don't get everything. We got to make choices.
Yeah, even for those who have decided to have monogamy from the get-go. Even if you were virgins when you got married and this is your person, which is
right.
But you are saying no to other possibilities.
Yeah, exactly. You're saying no to certain other things, and that's okay. You can still either enjoy them in your head or you can grieve them or something. Mm-hmm. And then if it's something like kink, say, where it isn't impossible, right. I think there's room to explore and see if there's an openness that you didn't know. I mean, everything's uncomfortable at first. You think about the first French kiss you had.
Oh, yeah.
We have to earn our comfort with things. So you may find you've got a hard no on this and it's something your partner's interested in, but you also may find, wait, maybe there's some room to play or play a little bit with it or use it in certain ways, even if it's not all the way. And I would want to at least explore with a couple what those options might be.
I love that. It's back to the playfulness, the permissiveness, that don't be freaked out right away, to allow for at least conversation and fantasy about it, or just even your partner talking to you about it. Tell me why you want to pee on me. Let them be.
Yeah. And don't, I guess my main message is don't pathologize each other. Don't shame each other. There's nothing off limits in terms of what we find erotic. Now, there are certain things that are illegal to do.
Right.
But don't shame each other. Have curiosity and gentleness. None of this means you have to do it, right. But start with just understanding what's a turn on for each other and make some space for that. That will go a long way.
Jessa, you are such a joy and a treasure trove of all the things. Every time we talk, I'm like, we could have an entire series on this, and maybe we shall someday in the future. But for right now, I want them to go get your book, Sex Without Stress, A Couple's Guide to Overcoming Disappointment, Avoidance, and Pressure. And I will have a link to that in the show notes, so you don't have to pull over your car or get off the treadmill right now. Just click the link and you can get that. Any final thoughts or, words of encouragement for the couples of the world out there, Jessa?
I want everybody to know it can get easier. You really can. If you adopt these mindsets and these changes and you practice, your sex life can be easy. It really can, almost no matter what is happening for you and your partner.
Amen. Here's to easy.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time today, hon.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Wonderful to talk to you.
Thanks for for listening to the Sacred Psychology Podcast. I pray you found some inspiration and empowerment to go out and make this life the most fulfilling possible. You can follow Sacred Psychology on Facebook and YouTube. If you haven't yet, please go to Apple Podcasts and subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. Tag us on social media and let us know what you think as well. Please note that the information provided is not meant to convey professional, psychological, or medical advice. If you could use such services, I highly recommend seeking them out from someone you trust. To get in touch with me personally or to see how we might work together, please check out ariatherapy.com or talesfromatrapezoid.com. Until next time, everyone.